When we talked about the pathways of change and beauty that are happening, I feel like it comes when people are doing the work they came to do. Their waters, the pathways start to shimmer. That light starts to shimmer, wellspring of beauty, in the sense of really listening to their gifts, listening to why they're here, and taking action and movement from that place.
Welcome. Thank you for being here with us. It is a beautiful week of celebration and rest for me, as the book that I have been writing through the initiations of these past months has now gone to the printers. It is called Intuition: Access Your Inner Wisdom, Trust Your Instincts, Find Your Path, and it is being published through DK Books this December. It's been an incredible process, and I look forward to sharing the fruits of it with you later this year. Starting in August, we will begin our second year of Presence, our online community for creative, connected, and courageous living. This is a wonderful time to join on an annual membership where you get 4 months complimentary and join us for a full adventure around the spiral. You will have access to everything we've created this past year as well. The themes we explore are grief and transformation, rituals and cycles, sacred activism, yoga and meditation, energy, intuition, leadership, creativity, and regenerative living, with time for integration along the way. And as well as that, you get monthly tree whispers, weekly contemplation questions. I share videos from any of the Future is Beautiful live content there. We have these incredible circle community calls where we come together, as well as a chat group where we share stories and questions and presence, really. I also do extra workshops. For example, during this lockdown, we did quite a lot of extra calls, and we also did a workshop on foraging because it felt really in tune with what we all needed. And there's calls with special guests, there's special meditations, mantras, yoga asana classes, things that I love, which I share, such as poems, talks, book recommendations. I share about where we are in the moon cycle so that we can live in tune with the new and the full moons. And I also share recordings of talks and workshops that I've done in the past that you can enjoy. It is a beautiful and powerful accompaniment to your journey. And it's really reasonably priced, just at the price of a couple of yoga classes a month. So you get all of that when you're a member. And I hope to spend time with you there. This week's episode is with a dear sister, Erin Dixon, that I met last year en route to a gathering for the Community Weavers Guild. We shared deep healing time of ritual and ceremony with the waters and the land. I appreciate Erin's presence and way of expression so deeply. Erin relates to the Newa concept Atepamisiwak, which means the free people who define themselves. She belongs to the sacred crystal clear waters of Skeleton Lake and is a member of the Meitei Nation of Ontario. Erin sits with the Bawaja Gaiwan Dream Drum Circle and learns, works, and grows together with many nations of peoples from across Turtle Island and Aki Kwe, which means Mother Earth. She is lead faculty at the Banff Centre for Arts and is currently doing research on wise practices within truth and reconciliation, or right relations, supporting think tanks and thought leader groups, and more recent dialogues on Indigenous women in leadership, matriarchy, Mother Earth, and the changes of our time tides. Erin is co-chair of the advisory board and facilitator for the Feather Carriers Leadership for Life promotion work, and is on the board of directors for the Canadian Association for Suicide Prevention. Erin works locally with Senator Gwen Boniface in wayfinding and moving right relationship in truth and reconciliation forward across the bioregion, weaving collective leadership and community vision. She shares and facilitates nationally and internationally in transcending paradigms and centering Indigenous wisdom. In this conversation called Beyond the Edge, We Soar Together, we explore the themes of truth and reconciliation, living systems, and reciprocity. And we contemplate the question, are wellsprings of beauty our living systems for change? I hope that you enjoy this episode. Welcome to The Future is Beautiful, with me, your host, Amisha Gadiali. On this show, we explore the weave between politics, spirituality, creativity, and sustainability. It's time for us to move beyond silos and into an integrated way of being. Every one of us has ideas and personal experiences to share that can lead us to a brighter future. This is the revolution. Despite the challenges we face as a global community or the pressures that we meet in our daily lives, when we stop and dare to dream, to ask ourselves the big questions and to share what we are already doing, we create the future that we wish to wake up for. That future is beautiful. Erin, I am delighted to welcome you to The Future is Beautiful. Thank you for being here with us.
Thank you for inviting me.
I would love for you to share a little bit around the work that you're doing on truth and reconciliation and what that really means.
Well, thank you for the invitation. I'll just introduce myself in the language of the land here, which is Anishinaabe-Moan. I'm in the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people in the waters of Lake Gojijing or Lake Kuchiching and Lake Wasayagaming, which is Lake Simcoe. So Anin Boju Tansei Saki Segi Erin Dixon Dishnakaz Atupamiziwak Métis Kwayandao Skeleton Lake Akikwe Donjaba. When I introduced myself as Saki Segi Hagen, Peter Wynne gave me that name that came through a ceremony in his vision of a woman walking out of the waters, speaking to life through the poplar trees to know what to do. And he talked about there was a wind coming. At first, I wasn't quite sure how to hold that, but it always comes clear every moment. And even when you ask me that question about the spirit or the nature of truth and reconciliation, I feel like it probably is the same sort of thing where it becomes clear as we continue to walk with that inquiry of what that means. Even starting to learn a little bit about Anishinaabe-Moan helps me feel the spirit of the land here, the truth of the land here, the spirit of the land that's here to come into right relationship with where I am. I remember former Chief Phil Fontaine would say, who was a residential school survivor, that aspect of truth and reconciliation will mean something completely different for every person. It'll be a certain type of walk. When I feel into the essence of that invitation, I do go all the way back to the work of Mahatma Gandhi and Satyagraha in the essence of truth force or spirit force. And so that wind that I talked about coming out of the waters, I believe is that truth force. So when we think about the waters of our being, the waters of spirit, of heart, of life, those are the things that if we listen into, that new life is coming through, whether we're speaking into the pain, the tension, the disillusionment, the ignorance, whatever that is, that will actually make way for life and right relationship, which could continue to build reconciliation or pathways of coming together. So I do feel like coming into maybe the wellspring of what truth really means and continuing to ground ourselves in that gives life to those things. I'm curious on your thoughts too, and in some of your inquiry around speaking and being with the land and how that grounds us and holds us so deeply in some of those bigger inquiries where we all sort of come from different pathways at this time.
It's impossible to answer this question without remembering the first time you and I met and arriving together at an airport to drive to the mountains, and then you sharing, let's go to the ocean, feeling this full body response to yes, we must go to the ocean, and to go in the way of ritual and in the way of prayer and communion, that we had just landed into Spain, that you had come from Canada and I had come from the UK, that we were going on a journey to a gathering, and that the first thing that needed to happen was that we needed to arrive and honor where we were and be received as well as make offering in that first moment of landing. And how, as we did that, and we were able to receive some of the water from the ocean and take this and receive some of the spring water from the mountain and take this up the mountain and weave through the water and the land and bring that sacred reciprocity into the gathering of the humans and the land and the waters, how alive and real and connected that felt in my body. I know that to be truth. And when I think of how I was raised by this society to be, you might arrive somewhere on a plane and then it's like, hey, what can I get? And your first thoughts are like, what should I buy? Like, what should I drink? And like, what experiences can I take from this? It's such a different way of relating. That's one of the big shifts in my own journey, because I was raised to be like that. Many of us were, that are part of this global capitalist neo-colonial culture. What happens if we are able to be very intentional about the way that we walk and the way that we relate?
That's so beautiful. Thank you for taking me there. That spirit of intention happens when we're really listening in. Because even in those moments, I could feel, like you said, that aliveness in my heart, my full body, on what we could do together, in the sense of going to the ocean. And at first I knew why, to make offerings and to connect. And then there's always sometimes the mystery that might be underneath of that as well. I remember having that reflection of the salt water and the connection to our grandmothers, our mothers, that aspect of femininity that we talk about, the matriarchy, the tears of our ancestors, of those that have come before us, and bringing it through the threshold, those spring waters, that fresh life coming through, and making those offerings together. And I do feel that too, in some way, opens up the greater I, or something that you can't put words on, for what it means to really live into truth and reconciliation in a very deep way. I'm brought right to that moment when you start to talk about our journey. And I feel like it has to do with the level of connection and aliveness within those moments of listening. So I remember arriving at the airport. I didn't have a plan to go there, but when I was flying in, I had a sense, I had a feeling, and I had that feeling in my heart on what I needed to do, and to create that invitation. And I feel like sometimes, when within the intentionality of our relationships, if we can deeply listen to the heart and listen to the land, and sort of start to lean into that a little bit more, it allows us to expand out into our relationality, into what's possible, and into the deeper spirit that is moving through all life. And so when I feel about our changes that we're in now, I often go to the waters. It's a thing that sort of comes first. And I was just so grateful that we could share in our different ceremonies when we went to the ocean, and we could sing together in the ways that we carry, and make offerings in the way that we do, and lift up all that those waters represent, and carry them with us. And one thing that I hear a lot is part of it, and often remains unspoken, is the tears of our ancestors. Some of that, which we're all speaking about now, but we're carrying through that threshold of those spring waters, and that new life that's coming through, and to lift them up together. And I feel that alone, when you're describing that story, represents so much. So I don't want to put too many words to it, but I feel it also talks about just really listening in, deeply listening, and expanding into our relationships, allowing ourselves to expand. So allowing our prayers and our what's possible to expand into all of the waters that move throughout all of life. And so therefore it's sung in a greater way. In some of our work at the BAMP Center, I had a dream when we first started the Truth and Reconciliation, I think the summit work there, I had a dream to go to an area where the glacier becomes the waterfall and it feeds the watershed, and to pray and to sing and feast the waters there because of the changes that we were in, and to work very closely with the water for that new life. And I do feel like that part of the reconciliation or truth or right relationship is at the heart of it, is that expansion into our relationship with, people say, the natural world, with all of life, so that we can sing into creation. There's a beautiful grandmother in Australia. I know it's Rosie, but she speaks about our singing the world into being again, and how that comes through the heart and through deeply listening to the land. So there's so many words there about deeply listening in our song lines, but it's about that deep expansion in the waters. Here they say the baby win of that heart knowledge, of that new life. So when you speak even about the story, I can feel my heart expand into what we were able to be together, and to acknowledge that the history. I know when we were together, the pain that I had as well because of the history with Spain and the conquistadora, and some of the pathways that happened and that we're still moving with today, and laying down prayers for that history, and the healing for everyone, because it's still some of the truth that we're still listening into.
There's more awareness at this moment of these histories that are asking to be healed. Nobody is spared from that. It affects every single one of us, and all of our ancestors were traumatized in what they received or what they did, and it's all part of the same story. It's like a time of going beyond like a side or like right and wrong, but into what is the deeper healing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do feel that we're at a place that we can create spaces that hold everything, that hold all of our stories. There's a lot of prophecies that speak about our time now, where we'll come back together and share those stories and share those songs. We're in the middle of, just here in Turtle Island in Canada, where we still have the Indian Act. We still have sides in there's a lot of systemic racism. So though we can hold all the stories, we don't have a system that actually, it's not like a plurinationhood where all of the rights and sovereignty of the nations are held up together within the system. In some ways, we try to create dialogue that, when we talk about opening up collective healing, or we're opening up that circle of healing, it does always, that's for everyone. But then there's, I think, another body that's also sitting in here, where we're looking at still the level of suicide. We're still looking at all of these other aspects that are impacted by the system itself. So it's the part of the nature of the work is holding the beauty and that reality of our collective healing. And then also knowing that there's a lot of people here that are doing beautiful work to create harmony, to create those changes that are here to bridge our time and space, because there are still those like lived experiences of that system that are still living. We call it sometimes a living history, because we still have many nations without water with certain aspects. So it's hard to even put words around it. Sometimes the truth that's still experienced or has not been expressed. And so I'm grateful for all the people that are continuing to hold space for everyone, so we can come into what we need to do wherever we're living, in a relational sense and in a collective sense, so that we can lift up what's possible together. So we have a lot of beautiful people across Turtle Island doing work around truth and reconciliation or right relationship. Some of it remains unseen. It's just the building of that relationship, but the work is happening. So I'm very grateful.
Mm. Yeah, that's so beautiful. And I didn't mean in any way that like everyone's healing is the same.
No.
But I have been contemplating quite a lot the healing of those that come from the colonial families and the trauma lines on that side as well. And that that maybe in order to heal where the systemic issues are now, we need to be able to heal back through there as well, like without shame, in order to kind of come to a place where we can look very clearly at what is still happening today and be able to weave with it in a different way.
We can create space for those types of pathways. We can lift everyone up, including those that have come before us, like myself. It's about 20 years ago now, over 20 years ago, I was in a mental health. I was in a hospital a few times. When we talk about lifting up our pathways for our ancestors, I remember my grandmother had received shock treatment, had received certain diagnosis. And all I remember when I was in there is listening to spirit, listening to the beauty, and them saying they're telling you what they know, but not what is true. And so just listening for that truth, even being institutionalized, listening for the beauty of life and knowing that though that was existing, and then praying and knowing what my grandmother had suffered through with several series of shock treatments that I had, and it gave me the power to actually understand what was happening to myself, to live that through her, for her, to do that healing work as a family. I remember about during that time when I started to understand what that meant, to go backwards, to heal through time. And we were at a conference for suicide prevention. And I remember one of the men who had worked in community for over 30 years starting to speak about epigenetics and the 14 generations. And my whole body started to dance. Similar to even when we got off that plane to go to the water, like it could feel the truth of what he was speaking to and where that power, that turning happens within ourselves, and how, as you said, we can do that weaving work very naturally and will naturally be moved into those spaces from those internal cues. Yeah.
As we have a very global community that are listening, not everyone will fully understand what the history is in Turtle Island and how it still impacts different nations, peoples today. Could you share a little bit around that?
Sure, absolutely. I think one of the biggest pieces is that it's wherever you go across Turtle Island, and Turtle Island refers to our creation stories here. It's a big thing to speak about because it's the experiences still lived, the impacts are still felt. But we just, they just finished the Truth and Reconciliation Commission, and there's a living calls to action. We're coming into a 5-year look at what it means. And some of the body of work that came through the listening to the survivors of residential schools, those that went to day schools, and those that were impacted in many different ways. And we just also had a report on murdered and missing Indigenous women and girls, which also talks about those impacts of our history. And so those are very recent things that our governance systems and organizations and communities are trying to listen into and respond to. So the impacts of our history is almost sometimes hard to speak about. It leaves me without words. One of the words that they tried to put at the front was a cultural genocide of what we experienced here in Turtle Island, in the sense of when you talk about the intentionality of relationship, the intention was for there to be no longer Indigenous people, the culture, the people for no longer remain. So that's still, it's something unspeakable, but something that people are talking about in their communities, having healing circles, but also talking about what that looks like today. So similar to Australia and New Zealand and South Africa, all over the world that went through, whether it's residential schools, reservation system, apartheid systems, all those types of systems to cut, I would say, the heart of the people off and to move forward a different type of system. And sitting with Dr. Cynthia Wesley Eskimo yesterday, she was trying to create a presentation to open up an 8-week series. And the first thing that she talked about was worldviews and creation stories. And within that, she was just talking a little bit about that time where the sort of, what happened to our humanity, because the one system that was built off the economy was moving in. And that's the only thing, that's what the worldview of what mattered. and all of the other worldviews and ways of relating and being in the land and singing were being cut off. And that is basically like when you go down to worldview, you can look at very, very different ways of relating. And so when we talk about right relationship and what we're moving through, there's some very practical things about living life well, or Bamadzu, and coming back to that good life and being able to come into harmony with how we relate and live day to day and what was taken from people working in child welfare, every level of the system, traditional law, bringing that back. So, and it's a very deep process that we're in right now, but there are many people, as your invitation creates, that are creating pathways of beauty, that are creating pathways of new life, that are moving through those from their own personal, their family, communities out across the entire nation to make those changes for the generations to come and to lift up and to honor those that have come before. I don't know if that's helpful, but the One Truth and Reconciliation Commission website, in the TRC website for Canada, provides a lot of pathways of knowledge. If anyone is listening and they want to hear more, they'll find a lot more information there straight from the people and what's happening.
With the suicides that you mentioned now, can you share more about that as it is in this present moment?
I was shown a graph of the deaths that we've experienced across Canada, Turtle Island, from COVID, and then the deaths from overdose, and how much more there are. And so sometimes when we talk about suicide or living the life we came to live, living life well, again, almost going to an unspeakable place when there are young people that are taking their lives at 13, 9, very, very young. And to really start to understand the impacts, and the truth that is still being experienced. The work that we do here at home or with the feather carriers work is to talk about promoting life, to change the paradigm so that we're speaking about it from our teachings for our original way of knowing, and the way Akikwe, the way Mother Earth is about giving life, nurturing our relations. It seems that we always have places that are a state of emergency for suicide across Turtle Island at different times because of that history. There's so many people doing that work to reconnect people to life, to our original teachings, to go back out into the land. In whichever way those teachings are coming forward, there's all of these cross weavings and interweavings between language and from drumming and bringing back that heartbeat. And there's just so many things that are happening to promote life. So I feel like it's a very it's a very hard thing to speak about myself. Part of the reason why I went into the hospital is because I didn't know how to live with the systems that are here. I think a lot of young people, when we heard them speak of how do I live knowing, we talk about the pathway of climate or all of these different systems, how do I deeply listen and be in life when I know those systems are happening? And I feel like a lot of, people that have had those pathways cut off are looking or listening for life. So I think I'm going out again because it's a hard one for me to speak about, but I don't know if that helped a little bit, Amisha, speak about it. But I remember even in Australia, they did a lot of work with opal fuels and trying to bring back in different systems because of the suicide rates, the huffing rates with gas, all of these different things. They were trying to create other pathways to promote life and to transition because of that intergenerational trauma when we talk about the severity and what's right at the surface, because it's only a generation or 2 generations, or it's still a lived experience within families. Yeah, I just wanted to pause there, if that's okay, just for you to guide the conversation if I'm going too deep, because I think I'm feeling this tension of like how deep to go into those wells in the spirit of the dialogues that you carry in conversations.
Yeah, this show is about healing as we are exploring these different ways that we can heal and open up to more beauty and to systemic change. I think it's always a question, like, how much do we need to understand the trauma? Like, how much do we need to be in the trauma? How deeply do we need to understand the trauma? You know, or how much can we sit in or move in the new story and the new paradigm and the healing practices and rituals. And so I share that just to say I don't know what is too deep or what is too dark. That place of beauty and systemic change has to come from understanding really where we are and how we got here. And at the same time, there's only so much that the intellect can do and hold. So much of that lifting that you speak of happens in invisible ways.
Yeah. At home here, we always do our work with elders. And that's for us a really powerful way to ground the depth and of the experience, whether it's through the stories or through talking about the land acquisition, like how the land was taken and some of those pieces. But to hear their stories and the beauty and the way that they carry them, but that it helps our bodies, like that full body knowing, as you were saying. So we're not just hearing it, but we can start to feel it. And so I'm very grateful in all of our work that we are working collectively with all of the stories, because it's, yeah, there's a certain power that comes from being able to hear that across when we're in circle together, to be able to have those types of safe spaces. And maybe that's why it comes up at, being in the circle with the medicines in ceremony, and having a way to hold everyone is always so important, and to honor those stories and those lived experiences. Yeah, I do feel that being able to, and we always invite people, but within ourselves, but to allow that gravity to move us forward, to allow ourselves to be turned and to feel even that discomfort. People say getting comfortable with the discomfort, will open up and continue to move us forward in a deep way. So thank you for just inviting that depth. And because I do feel like within, especially the conversation of truth and reconciliation, all of the elders here, when I read through some of the beautiful work that came before the commission here in the Aboriginal Healing Foundation, so many knowledge keepers came together and said, we need to continue to stay with the truth, to continue to carry us through. And so I do feel like that depth of that lived experience will carry us and create those pathways of beauty, and keep us grounded and grounding our roots into that expansion. Mm-hmm.
Can you share more about the pathways of beauty as you see them?
Yeah, one of the first pathways that comes immediately to mind when I was in Pekanjikaming First Nation, and I had the gift of being in the land there and in the schools. And one of the things that the school wanted was to bring back the drum. Their community drum was in a museum in Red Lake. And when we were in the kindergarten class, these two young grandmothers picked up the drum, and they were just looking at each other like they had known each other throughout time. And they were just singing and drumming. I was like, oh, they know why they're here.
And how old were these young grandmothers?
I, I, I think maybe I'm hearing 5 or 6.
Mm-hmm.
Something happened because of the experience there, but what happens when their spirit is connecting with those drums and then the land and everything that had been experienced there as a community in the land? Something so, as you said, powerful happened, similar to those ocean waters, that was uplifting. And so I see that. I see the young people lifting up and creating those pathways. And there's some very powerful interweaving. On the West Coast here, there's a lot of work being done to bring back Indigenous law. So to bring back traditional systems of law, which is very, very powerful and very different. It's very community based on story, and just starting to transition, because a lot of the people that are incarcerated in different systems are still, the Indigenous people from that. So there's this turning of the wheel there. So these other systems of like creating new systems of law of going back to traditional education, being in the land. These are what are changing and creating new pathways. And so for me, a lot of it is our original teachings, wherever we're from in Mother Earth or Akikways. We all carry that traditional knowledge inside of us inherently, but also just to reconnect with that. And I feel a lot of the pathways of beauty are coming through the land, coming through the culture, and some of those magical moments. Again, in a completely different way, it's almost impossible to put it into words how much change there's happening. Even though sometimes we feel we're at a standstill, every time I'm with a group of change leaders or people that are called to do the work, they're going deeper into themselves, deeper into the change work. And you can just feel those sacred reciprocity lifting through. Yeah, even traditional food systems returning, people doing a lot of work around food systems. So it's like a wellspring of beauty in the sense of really listening to their gifts, listening to why they're here, and taking action and movement from that place. And one of the waterways here, Wawasiagaming, it means the shining waters. And John Zagosky would always talk about how the light hits the waters in the afternoon. It creates almost like a golden pathway. I don't know if you've the shimmering pathway. And when we talked about the pathways of change and beauty that are happening, I feel like it comes when people are doing the work they came to do. Their waters, the pathways start to shimmer. That light starts to shimmer. There's the glowing pathways because of the alignment. And that includes that deep, as you were saying, that deep ancestral, that deep inner work, the change work, knowing and using our gifts for those pathways. But we're very much deeply alive. And so we're brought into beauty, and that therefore the pathways, our footsteps, as we often talk about the lotus footstep and what that means as we do our work today. But I think about those shining waters a little bit. That's actually when I went to the bubbling spring this morning, this area where the water comes out of the land. That's the song that I was singing, even though it was early morning. But in the spirit of your offering here, I believe are those shining pathways that will carry us through.
Is that a song that's not normally sung in the morning?
Well, I think you can sing it whenever you're called. But sometimes I'm just aware, like the spirit of it is around the afternoon light there. Sometimes when the sun is hitting at it, but really it's a song for whenever it comes through and is called. Yeah.
I just want to hear the song.
Well, I can share it with you if you want.
Yeah, would you?
Yeah, at home here, I might have brought it with us when we were together, but this drum here is I belong to the Bawajigewin Dream Drum Circle, and it's all about it's a really beautiful story actually, because John from some of his teachers was given the teachings and sort of the lifting up of the dream drum, and the dream drum has two sides. And inside is the weaving, the interweaving of kind of what we were just talking about, of that pathway of why we're here, what we're dreaming, what's coming through, and how that connects to the cosmic web, how that connects to all of creation. So we're doing some work lifting that through. So I just wanted to share a little bit about that dream drum because of its role in helping to bring forward those pathways. So maybe I'll do 2 rounds just so you can hear it. Wawaseagaming Kijago Wawaseagaming Kijago Wawaseagaming Kijago Wawaseagaming Kijago Wawaseagaming Kijago Wawaseagaming Kijago. Kind of gonna
Thank you.
Mm. One of the things that matters to me most in the conversation of truth and reconciliation is the listening to the land, is listening to the heartbeat of Akikwe, of Mother Earth, of all of the life that's there, is like the deep right relationship, how we can expand into that. And I'm grateful for the dream drum here, or the other drums, or the culture that we carry from wherever we come from, to honor and feast those pathways of life and to connect with each other again. So even just being able to share that song with you, even in the depths of speaking into a little bit about the impacts of the history here and the living experiences, having the gifts of culture, those ceremonies, as we shared, are, I feel, what will lift the spirit and our collective spirit through these times and into the times, as people call it, the turning or interbeing. There's so many ways to speak about it, but our cultures and the gifts that have been with us throughout all time are with us now. I can feel just some of the beauty that of the work that you do in carrying some of the songs and your teachings and stories into the yoga practices. Sometimes when you make your offerings, and how deeply that helps to sing the body and our spirit awake, so that we can really be fully here when we're doing the work, and to be living life well when we're doing this type of change and staying healthy.
Hello. We're taking a short pause from the conversation. On behalf of our team and our community, thank you for being here and co-creating The Future is Beautiful. Much dedication, love, and time goes into the production of this show. We believe in being advertising free in a world that's always trying to sell us stuff we don't need. And so we make this show with you and for you, thanks to your support. There are 3 ways you can be more involved, so we can share the vision, wisdom, and creativity here as we explore what it means to be a human in this time. You can support the podcast by sharing it with your friends, posting episodes on social media, and doing iTunes reviews. You can support as a patron by making a monthly or one-off donation of your choice. And with this, you join the Global Patrons group and monthly video calls where we share connection and insight. You get to know the other amazing patrons from around the world, their stories and their work, and you offer direct support to me and the team, as well as being brought into the behind the scenes of creating something like this. It sounds like a lot, but it's as much or as little as you want to get involved in. You can become a member of Presence, our membership collective of care and practice, where we explore how to embody the themes of the podcast with workshops, calls, special events, tree whispers, and powerful tools, practices, and rituals that you can bring into your life. This is open to absolutely everybody as we create an inclusive and diverse space that celebrates well-being as a human right, where we explore together what it means to be creative, courageous, and connected to ourselves, each other, and the earth. This is about embodying sacred activism. We love meeting patrons and Presence members, and how being part in this way weaves our lives together, as well as making this show possible. If anything from this conversation has moved or inspired you, please get more involved. All information can be found at www.thefutureisbeautiful.co/community. This show really can't go on without your patronage and Presence membership, so please do make it happen. And now, back to the conversation. I wondered if you would share with us, I don't know this story at all, but I feel you as one of the most intuitive beings that I know, that you have this beautiful way with where your inner world and your subconscious and the collective consciousness just sort of wave through you and out in your expression and in the way that you see. I imagine that in this human life as Erin, it hasn't always been like that, or maybe you haven't always been able to trust that expression. And I have been contemplating a lot over this year in particular, the importance of that relationship with our own intuition and allowing ourselves to really speak and live from that place, and how that is the pathway into beauty on a personal and a collective level. I'm also reminded, as you know, I've been writing a book about intuition, and so within that, there's the scope of making it appealable to people that don't trust their intuition, that don't believe in the intuition, that think it's woo-woo or whatever. And that's been a really interesting kind of dance for me. And it's been a real solidifying process of that which I know, and in some ways always knew, but forgot for many years in between. Yeah, I'm curious as to how that's unfolded to you, because for me, you feel such a true expression, such a true vessel.
Oh, thank you for your kind words. And you're right, it's not comfortable. Well, in the sense, like it gets to a place, I think, of expansion, but like actually living into it, creating ourselves an invitation, sometimes an invitation. And sometimes those things come without realizing. I mentioned very, very briefly about being hospitalized. So I was walking, I remember I was going to a law class, I think in university, and almost felt like getting struck by lightning. I don't know how to explain it, but like it was something in my being that opened up, but it also hurt my nervous system on the deepest level because I had no cognitive relationship to what I was experiencing. That for me became a deep pathway. And I think sometimes we're given moments of choice, of like we call them turning points, or here on Shape of Mods when it's like that changing life, but where we have those choices. And I was put in an observation room after some time because I know I didn't know what was happening to myself, but something happened while I was there where it was almost like even in all the medication I was given, all I could hear was my intuition. All I could hear was spirit, in the sense of they're telling you what they know, in the sense of trying to give you the care based on their knowledge frameworks, but not what was true, in the sense of what my spirit and my heart needed. And so making a choice to follow, without realizing it, I followed that truth, that pathway of truth. Looking back 20 years, 22 years later, I can say, oh, I made a choice to follow the baby winner, to follow truth. But at the time, I had no idea. I was just following all that I could hear that was calling me to life. And I started to follow that pathway. It was not necessarily comfortable at first either. One of the greatest helpers is some of the work you've been doing as well, is going into the land. When we think about our spherical intelligence as a human being, our whole sphere of relationality, and our intuition, almost like when we think about the pulse of the lotus opening, that very center essence of who we are and all of our ways of knowing coming open, I think comes from that wellspring of spirit and that truth of the heart, and those sort of pathways. And there are moments of turning that we might get sharper invitations to go deeper into our intuition, whether it be through health or a work, or even this time of COVID, where it's asking us to listen more within and living out from that place. There's certain practices like qigong or yoga that help us live from the inside out and connect to all of life through that. So I feel like there are some types of cultivation practices, depending on your disposition, to go deeper into, that can also support that walk with it. But for myself, it was making that choice of, well, either I'm going to be what they say I am, or this is the reality, or I can feel and follow that pathway, and those pathways of the heart. We were with a group of change leaders a few weeks ago, and I saw this beautiful image, and I don't know what type of organism made it, but on this one leaf, there was like this pathway that looked like a coiled snake or serpent. It was very, very powerful. But when I think about the spiraling and the spiraling expansion of life, like I think about that pathway that is moving and going back into itself and coming back out. And I feel like our intuition just allows us to be at that pulse that gives us that shining pathway, that good life, really moving from the inside out. When we think about wanting all of life to reach its potential and its full blossoming, I feel intuition and being connected to our inherent wisdom is very much at the core. Finding ways to tap back into our intuition and live out from that wellspring helps to wake up that center column of our being. I have so many funny memories that come up when you ask me that question about a story, because I think sometimes we have all of those little moments that add up to like this pathway of like listening and following. And I made this invitation to myself because I kept dreaming so much that I would start to live into the dreams I was having fully. And even if I felt like a child, didn't matter, I'd still do it. And so when I had that dream about feasting the glacier and the waterfall at the Bow Lake, that was one of those moments. I did have some friends that came with me and I was supported to go there, but I still had that feeling of like, tension. And I feel like understanding that within ourselves, and when we're listening to our intuition, that it's natural to have those moments of tension where might want the frontal lobe to take over to do what's practical or right or those sorts of things, but just starting
Or
to
what you want to do,
what you want to do.
so comfortable or
Yeah.
fun or easy.
Yeah, I'm definitely going through a massive period of that right now that I can't even put words to, but I do feel like it's kind of like the invitation, the Mikans, the life path teachings here at home that John speaks about. One of the big things at the very beginning is Anjima Madzuin, which is the changing life. And I feel like when we listen to our intuition, those changes are beautiful, like our spirits being pulled through in a very, very beautiful way. And all of that good life is happening, even though that, we might be inside of an imperial system that's still moving and changing. But we can still live that with our intuition. We can still cultivate that pulse of life that's coming through ourselves and through the change work that we might be engaged in. We talk about living systems and what's the future forward.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. And yeah, it's interesting as well. It's like another function of the sort of systemic framework that we live in, that there's meant to be like this one big story, that changed everything, like a movie. But our life is so much more subtle than that. and we're just constantly like edged a little bit in every moment, and it's not normally so blockbustery.
Yeah. But you bring up something really powerful. We had a group of Indigenous women in leadership from across Turtle Island thinking into what we need to thrive in our leadership. I feel like intuition, that's at the very center. And one of the things that I kept hearing when we were together is beyond the edge, we soar, like we can soar together. And I feel like part of the reason we've been at the edge is because we haven't fully cultivated that intuitive aspect, whether we call it like the esoteric feminine, or there's so many different words to describe that part of our nature and being in life. But I do feel it's at the heart and very, very integral to any type of change that's happening, is to really lift that up. And so how do we first cultivate that in ourselves and live out from that space is a very powerful inquiry to offer. Mhm.
And what else came from these gatherings around leadership, coming from a more matriarch, feminine woman perspective?
Yeah, it was very beautiful and powerful to hear the stories of everyone that was present. My role was to gather and to listen. Yeah, there was a lot of words that began with rematriation, regeneration, rebirth. So that we were in that cycle of coming back into being. And one of the biggest reflections that we carried is, even when we start to contemplate on what is the nature of the matriarchy, in some areas still carry that essence and spirit, but really getting connected to Akikoy, to Mother Earth, to our life waters, and how from those relations we can feel and are held up in the unconditional love that really binds and holds life together. So they talked about a lot around values led, and we hear that all the time within leadership, and spirit led change. And so coming, as you said, when we arrived in the airport, we came and we came in ceremony, and we came in the ways that we did, and we made our offerings. So that sacred reciprocity was at the center there, and understanding what that means when we hold all of life in our hearts, the type of regeneration that's possible together. So not just thinking about myself or my family, my community, but holding Akikwe, Mother Earth, as in the center of our hearts, as well as us being in the center of Akikwe. But when we have that, the wellspring of life, so they talked a lot about those types of change. And the other really cool part, and I feel like we were able to hear that echo in some of the chambers this past week, was to being fierce and then being very strong. What's really important right now, and being able to stand for that, to protect life and to nurture life and to be able to bring that back again. So for some reason, I can just hear people saying fierce a lot. And the other story that is maybe to share is one of the women stood up and talked about what would it be like if we followed our joy, if we followed what brought us joy and an upswell in our heart. She talked a lot about, like, we always have these sense that we need to be doing this and sort of something put on, but if we're living out sort of from that place of intuition, the wellspring of joy, and what would life look like from there. And there was a lot of tears, because there was still that turning towards awakening. Like when we talk about awakening the wisdom body, is about awakening those pathways of joy and beauty, and giving ourselves permission to live out from those places of intuition and knowing, and the wellspring of life that's moving, the current that's moving us. But yeah, just some very powerful intergenerational gathering, but but I think the sacred reciprocity, and really continuing to go deeper into what rematriation means and what that means for our time, the times that we're in, the changes that we're in, to have those teachings lead us forward, and that energy. And we're starting to see that move. One of the elders here, Jim Dumont, I was at an Indigenous Health Circle forum, and he was talking about the time of the new dawn, which is one of the many prophecies that are moving right now. But he said, because we're coming into that, when we talk about that sphere and medicine wheel, because we're coming into that time of the new dawn right now, and that's a sunrise, that however we relate, but women are giving birth to that change. Women are born to give birth. And so it's a very, very natural to continue to lift up that inherent wisdom and guidance that women carry, to bring in that new life, to bring in those changes, and not to make differentiation. But that was part of the teachings there, just in the essence of what we were talking about within healthcare, and all the people that were present. But yeah.
There's so much in there that feels like it would reignite our truth.
I think one of those things is like, I don't know if we say courage or clarity, but of having the courage to do what we really feel called, what's needed. I remember for some reason, I'm getting this story, when I ended up in Schumacher at a bioregionalism by design offering. There were grandmothers. One grandmother had a dream to go there to do ceremony because of all the oak trees and because of some of the history that was there still in the land. And so when we arrived on the second day of ceremony, all of these grandmothers were gathered in ceremony for the land, for the people, and for the future, for the life that was coming. And I learned so much from that. She had a dream. She had a vision, her intuition. She knew what she was being asked to do. She followed, she gathered others, and she lifted it up. And I think when we can come into that level of coherency and work collectively together, talking about those beautiful pathways, or those pathways of wisdom that will carry all of life through, I learned so much just from witnessing that moment, and the courage and clarity they had to do what came through their intuition and their deep knowing.
Yeah, and to be able to take others on that journey and into that process in an unapologetic way, knowing that you're not disturbing people. It's what we're here for. Might not be on the schedule, but
yeah.
You have access to amazing teachers and elders in your life that have been able to hold and guide you and teach you and show you how to connect with the land and live in the way of ritual and to trust yourself. I'm aware that not everyone listening has that. Maybe they can go on a journey to find teachers and elders, but it's not readily available in every culture. And then often it's part of an economy as well, you know, something you have to go and pay for. I wondered how you would guide a friend of ours now that's listening that feels that call to connect with the land, to feel that full body, heart vibration of their soul and their inner knowing, that wants to live in sacred reciprocity and has no idea what that actually means. Like, what do they do? How do they do that?
Yeah, very powerful question. And I can share that at first, when I first started on that pathway, I was doing a lot of work around environmental protection. And I realized, before we can actually promote life and protect all of life, people really need to feel the connection to life and feel the connection to the natural world. And so there's a lot of different invitations to go out. So when I first was going, often it was by myself. And, over time, I had met teachers and elders and others who were of a similar pathway. So I would say, first thing is giving yourself space to go out, even as you are, whatever, however you enter that space. And one of the biggest things here is when we're going into the land is when we get into a place where we feel called, or if we're going into the water for a paddle or going in even for a run, is offering, announcing who you are to all of the life that's there. And if you want, for us, we lay down sema or tobacco as an offering and a prayer, and just to say why we're here. And so whether you're, sitting under, I'm looking out at a beautiful pine tree. My grandmother here is, I often feast her. I will just give thanks in the ways that I feel called. In some areas, it's through corn. In other areas, it's through cotton. So many different ways. But to lay down our prayers, our thoughts, and our intentions of relationship. And if you feel called, you can offer a sweetness. So whether it's fruit or a spirit plate for your ancestors and the land, but offering some of the food as a way to feast those relationships and to sit. So I think that's like sort of the foundational way, is knowing where you feel called. And that also helps with the intuition, is really listening, even if it's a park or looking out the window, saying who you are. So announcing yourself to the universe, to all of creation. And then just going into inquiry and starting to deeply listen to the land, seeing what comes clear to your consciousness, what comes up in the center of the water there as you're reflecting, allows for that deeper connection and relationship. There's a lot of pictures going around, and I know some of I think it's Lama Solstrom, she talks about like the feminine journey of the Buddha. And so in that, she talks a little bit how when he crossed the waters, he laid down his offering in the sense of reclaiming all the time that he's been in Mother Earth and leaning back into the tree, but reclaiming all of those times and leaning back and laying himself down as an offering, just fully open to receive. And I feel like it's that simple. I know Elder Dyla would often say, and many elders on their healing journeys would say, even finding a grandmother or a grandfather, a rock or stone that you feel called, and laying out and letting the sun move through you, not only will provide regeneration, but really bring some things will come clear to your consciousness, perhaps, that you've been thinking about. And just taking those types of moments will naturally build relationship. Just as we turn on our phones, or, we're doing other things, we're building pathways, relational pathways that will deepen and ground our relational pathways in Akikwe, or Mother Earth. And again, there's no right or wrong way to do it, but often, especially for harvesting medicines, we'll lay down something first. And there's so many different teachings depending on where people come from. But I just fundamentally knowing that we are creation and we're there, returning to ourselves, truly returning to the beauty of who we are, and reconnecting to life, I think, in the most simple but profound way. I hope that provides a little bit of guidance. I'm not sure if that's helpful. I did some post grad work in eco psychology at one point. It's because of my experience within the mental health system. I wanted to understand, what does the land really say about the nature of my mind? What does the trees, what does the sun, what does the wind say about the nature of my consciousness of being in life? And so I feel like depending on our own pathway and inquiry or what we're going through, we can bring that to the land as well. And so there's a lot of work around co-becoming in Australia. And I know there's other frameworks of relationship, but that we and creation were becoming, or we're, growing together, so that our mind is not contained inside of our skull. Our mind is the vast sky, all of Akikwe, the cosmos, the earth. And sometimes when we lay back and we allow ourselves to rest in Mother Earth, we allow our intuition, we allow our way of knowing to really open up into that larger sphere of our humanity. And I feel those are some of the small but large gifts going out in the land can bring us. But I'm not sure if I'm going too deep into the waters there, but you don't need to go that deep either. You can just really rest your feet in the grass and your back on the earth and receive so much.
Thank you. That was a perfect offering. I feel like that's given so many different pathways into connection.
Okay.
in a really tangible way. So thank you for sharing. And I hope to be reunited with you by the waters sometime soon.
Yeah, me too. I feel that's a whole other, especially for that, a very deep and beautiful conversation, but the waters.
And Erin, how can people contact you if they want to be in touch or find out more about your work?
Yeah, I've kind of been underground a little, or I'm a water person, so maybe I've been in the water.
Thank you for emerging for us.
So I've had friends trying to help just support me make a few platforms of communication, but I'll leave my email and some connection to our work with the BAM Center of Feather Carriers so people can connect in that way. But by email, I don't have a website or anything at this point. I'm in the waters with you, but I'll leave my connection. And I welcome anyone, if they're going deeper into the work of truth and reconciliation, or even their own pathways of change and healing. I'm always love a beautiful conversation and grateful to be able to share today. Thank you for asking me these beautiful questions, but also for listening and giving me the opportunity to speak and reflect together.
Thank you. It's such an honor, and it's been my intention since we met for us to have this conversation. And as this conversation has happened in this moment where I am very tired, I have felt that there are not so many people I could talk to in this space where I'm so deep in the water. I appreciate that we can be in the water together, and that we can invite in the sharing of the waters. I guess what I mean by that is that in this particular moment, if you were to look at my face, you would basically be like, that person needs to go and lie down by herself for a few days. and it's not a space in which one would like enter into anything that's like important or public or revealing. I feel like something that I am interested in is just the realness of being deep in the water sometimes, and that we can be tired, and we can be in a space where like it's not like, yeah, I'm on my A game. Like, you know? And allow ourselves to really get to know each other deeper in the deeper waters. And what would happen if we were more willing to swim together, you know, rather than always just walk on the sunny day.
Yeah, I feel like that's what creates beauty. I just had this beautiful image of like even the breaststroke, like because you can expand and contract, but you're like you have this type of spaciousness. And I feel like when we can hold space for that level of depth and whatever is moving within us, it becomes a very powerful waterway. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. So thank you for your time. And what is the BAMP Center website so people can kind of connect through the BAMP Center?
I think it's www.bampcenter.ca.
That's
and
cool. We'll
is that cool?
Links. We'll post links.
Okay. I've been offline a bit because we've been in this middle space, but I believe that's yes. Yeah.
It is that?
Yeah, it is.
Did you just check?
I checked, yeah. Or the feather carriers work, yeah, is there too the same way. So but I'll put those links up for those and those that might be involved with life promotion work or suicide prevention or healthcare work. Mm-hmm.
Beautiful. Thank you so much, Erin.
Thank you, Amisha. I'm grateful that we could meet this as we did before in the deep waters. Thank you for the invitation and for all that you're doing here.
Thank you for spending your precious time with us. As always, you can find links to everything we mention in this episode, download our book, and discover so much more over on the blog. We don't believe in selling you things you don't need through this podcast, and so it's made possible with you, our community. If you loved this and would like to fund our show with a monthly donation or join our online group to connect with other listeners, please visit www.thefutureisbeautiful.co and click on Community and Support. Please also share with friends, hit subscribe, and leave us a review so we can grow. Those gold stars really help others find us, so these ideas can spread. Here is to us, creating a beautiful future together. The Future is Beautiful is made by an all-female team working voluntarily or on reduced rates until our listener support grows. If you have been moved by anything you heard here, please donate the equivalent of buying us a drink. All donations make a huge difference to us and will allow us to keep doing this and remain advertising free. Until next time, I leave you with this question. How will you create beauty in the world?